I called it the second game blues under Jimbo. Welcome into Loochador Podcast with David Nuño and Billy Liucci. This is presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. They carry all the best gear from the top brands, all the prices you'll love. Now shopping is more convenient than ever at academy.com and on the Academy app. Enjoy free shipping on orders of $25 or more with the sign-in, plus easy in-store or curbside pickup. Shop anytime, anywhere, and find your widest selection of colors, styles, and sizes. From grills to fitness equipment to workout clothes, everything you need to have and have fun out there is right there at academy.com. He's Billy Liucci. I already said that. Hi.
Hey, David. This before you start, this is not filled with any libations.
Okay.
It is a Sunday. I've got a cover story to write. We just traveled back from Miami. It's Nuño's birthday. Happy birthday.
I have not had a good birthday since I've worked at TexAgs.
I'm sorry that Miami. Yeah, it's like early in the year. Is that why you said the week too?
So since I've been here,
yeah,
the Colorado game, which was not a fun game.
Yeah, that was
okay.
So. And then you had to travel back.
App State, Miami.
Oh, wow.
Even before I got here, though, I believe Clemson a couple times have been the second game of the season.
You're right.
I think they've won one second game under Jimbo.
Can we get Nuño a happy birthday?
No, I'm good.
I think next year's second game it'll be Notre Dame, and then somebody. It'll probably be but it should be somebody they should win. They should beat. So no, we're drinking water. We're getting hydrated after a weekend at Miami.
It's a really good time.
It's a fun trip until it's not, and that was not a fun Saturday of football for. Anybody that watched, it was fun Saturday for the folks down in Austin, and that was about it. A&M, we'll talk about it later, but another SEC victim of an early season out-of-conference L this year. This is more than I've ever remembered in terms of the teams that people think matter. Bama, LSU, A&M. Who else has lost? South Carolina, Florida.
The only one who's won is Tennessee.
They have against Virginia, who's god-awful. I don't know if they lost yesterday.
No,
they were killed by James Madison at one point.
They won, but it was close.
Okay, or it was James Madison. Madison. Anyway, SEC looking rough so far for the first time that I can remember. And A&M, the problem with that is it's you can say, well, there are winnable games on the schedule.
I'm wrong. James Madison won 36-35.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But not. There are games that are winnable on the schedule when you look around the SEC and watch them play until you watch what happened yesterday at Hard Rock Stadium, where it was just such a bitterly disappointing performance for A&M. And I'm sorry, like if y'all don't sense me raging, pissed, and smoke coming out of my ears and banging on the table and stuff, there's two things I know. It's a long season, and that cuts both ways. That means it's a long season and teams can recover and find out what they do good, what they do poorly, and work on it and play a bunch of other teams that are trying to recover right now too. And which team's going to recover the best are going to be the teams that have a decent year. Or the other reality is Texas A&M can have certain issues that cannot be fixed this year, at least to the degree that they can go have the kind of season they need to have in year 6 under Jimbo. That's also a possibility, and I know most people today would say, well, that's it's a likelihood. I wouldn't say it's likely, but it certainly, they do not look close. I don't say close because a lot of the teams don't look close.
They don't look close defensively.
They don't look close at all defensively. The offensive line, I think, and I know Miami threw numbers at it, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but they still look far from it. They've got to I watch college football this weekend. I want to see them with more in the backfield, more firepower. I thought Amari ran tough, had a nice, solid game until that fumble. But there are just a lot of holes and issues here. We'll talk about special teams. We'll talk about it in a minute. But it is one game. So I've learned this. There's 10 of them left. One way or the other, it's wise to pace yourself. And I'm not saying we're not going to sit here and analyze this thing inside and out. We're about to do, and I'm going to do it writing today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Ask Liucci, all the way up through the week. But what I will say is I'm not going to sit here with – I was livid yesterday, just sitting there watching that thing, having to bite my tongue and just kind of go, what good is it going to do to, sit there and let a game get to you and vent when I'm down there trying to work and observe the game. Afterwards, it was a night killer, just like so many Aggies down there. Just didn't want to go out and cut loose and have fun. But I'll say this. You do realize how much more of it there is to go. So I'm just going to be real surgical and calculated today in terms of what I say and don't say, in terms of analyzing everything. And it's just, you've got to kind of just tap the brakes a little bit and say, we got to see how things play out, even though this was about as bad as I could have. I'm going to say this and I mean it. It was as bad. Forget the score. The 48 is just mind-blowing. The 33 is about what I thought A&M would score. If I knew, but there was a part of me that thought the Aggies could even get to 40. And they almost did, but that was in comeback mode.
Right. They only had 76 yards passing in the first half. They turned, and the first half felt very much like last year offensively.
Yeah, it did.
But they turned it on, and I got to give them that.
And I'll say this, too, about the first half. It's always looked to me a little better offensively. It always looked a little better. They weren't taking deep shots because Miami was sitting 8 miles back, just saying, that's what we're not going to let you do, which is funny because it was a week after New Mexico said, this is what we're going to let you, this is what we're going to dare you to do. Miami said, this is what we're not going to let you do. And to me, and we'll get to it, the biggest difference in the game was the two defensive coordinators. And look, everyone's going to talk about Durkin this week, but the one thing, we can talk more about it, but one side was attacking. They were attack.
The other was reacting.
Defensively. And the other side was just very passive in their approach. And I just didn't feel like it put, okay, they weren't going to give up the big play until they do. And then we're going to sit back and make you do this, that, or the other thing to it. And when that quarterback had time, it was just too easy. And we're going to dive into the defense. But my first reaction was perhaps the two biggest differences in that football game to me were the two D coordinators, and one being full speed, to the tilt, aggressive, and one not. And one side dictated the pressure.
Yep.
So, I can't really compare Shannon Dawson and Bobby Petrino because, to me, I think both of them had very different jobs on Saturday. One of them had a fifth-year quarterback that passed up the NFL. The other one had a quarterback starting in Game 5 who I thought played his ass off in Connor Wigman. But the other situation that I think was totally different was just what they were facing in terms of what the opposing coordinator was throwing at them. And Miami, whose guy was elite at Marshall last year, was just their top 5 defense in the country last year at Marshall, and they were just bringing it every play. And their defensive linemen were using their hands, which I didn't see anything from the Aggie defensive linemen. They were shedding blocks, getting in the backfield, making plays. Everything about what they did was more aggressive and more in attack mode. And some would say, you do that, you run the risk of giving up big plays. My problem is if you don't do that,
they give up big plays anyway,
and you give them up anyway, and you give up the drives. Miami defensively, he said, we're going to sit the safeties back, and we're going to play a lot of games up front and come at you, and you're going to complete short underneath stuff, and we don't think you can do it all the way down the field on us, and we don't think you can consistently run the ball because we think our defensive front can whip your offensive line's ass. And they did more than they needed to, that's for sure. But, they were right. A&M couldn't go, just like the first drive to start the third quarter. They have a great drive all the way down the field. Bobby Petrino adjusted. They're hitting open passes. They're getting the ball out of Connor's hands quickly to negate that rush. The receivers start making plays. The tight ends are making catches. You're going down the field, and they stall out. and you kick a field goal. That's a win for Miami. And it happened another couple times down there, especially down at the end when A&M was trying to come back. They had turnover on downs and interception. They just said, you can drive down, but you're just not. It was almost like what we've seen from Elko in the past in terms of sometimes the Aggies were in a little bit of a bend but don't break. They committed to stopping the run. They took that away from you. And then, it reminded me a little bit of how Elko did things. But we got a lot to discuss about the SEC because I think Bama's in legit trouble.
Well, we've been saying it for a while.
We've been saying it. I've been saying it all offseason. I've been saying it about Bama and OU. But most people have been saying it about A&M. And 2 games in, they look like they were correct. And it's going to take a lot for them to be wrong. The question is, can A&M pull out of it? So what I saw yesterday was so frustrating because they came with energy early. They look like, I said, man, they really brought the energy. They're being physical. They're moving guys off the line. And then it just all kind of went awry. And it was all like almost on that one pass that they hit up that seam for about, I don't know, it was 45, 50 yards.
Was it when Javon, they made the audible and they threw on Javon's
No, not
side?
that one. That was later. It was the one on Damani early, right up the seam. But you knew they drew up, and they knew they had a mismatch there, and they attacked it, and it kind of broke the seal for them. And they quickly scored right after that, and it was 10-0, and it's 10-7,
yep.
And they're right in it. But that game, it was. I feel like it was lost on the coordinator. The two DCs. I want to talk specifically defense in a minute, but that was part of it. The other part to me was special teams. They get a block punt, which was terrific, and then you give it right back. You miss a field goal. You give up a touchdown on a kickoff return. That was a backbreaker, absolute backbreaker. A&M fumbles on a key play there on the last play of the third quarter. Just a disastrous fumble on short yardage. So I go back to just the shooting yourselves in the foot throughout that game. We started to see the confusion pre-snap again, and just the play clock management. And early in the game, it looked good. Like early in the game, they had a little tempo to them, and they were the aggressor. And but the part no one's talking about where I think they really lost it was right there before the half.
Absolutely, the 10-point swing
or 14, whichever you want to call it. You get down there, and even if you just got that first down, then you're running out the clock, and you're kicking an end of half chip shot field goal, or you're scoring. That was because Miami had momentum by then.
Yep.
That was such an opportunity lost because you're on the road. The other team took momentum from you. You were given a gift with that fumbled punt, that muff punt return. You could have kicked the field goal and been up, what would it have been, 20 to 14, and getting the ball. So you got the ball to start that drive with a chance to really put some pressure on Miami. Could have been up 23-14 or 27, 2 scores, and then they start to feel it. Or you could have got the first down and scored a touchdown. If you gotten that, then you really put them on the brink, and it changes the locker room. It changes your locker room. But not only did you not do that, you miss a field goal from 42, and that's Bond's second in 2 games. It's a bit of a concern. You miss a field goal in game 2, and then you let them score in a minute. And they go after a true freshman corner. And they were moving the ball otherwise, by the way. It wasn't like just a one play.
Right.
But they go bombs away, perfect timing, catch the true freshman. Javon Thomas is going to be a really good corner. Hasn't played very much football. I remember Jalen Jones a couple years ago in Tuscaloosa.
I remember Chappelle, too.
Now, that was against Bama.
Yeah.
This is Miami. They don't have really good receivers. Restrepo's a stud, and that's about it, really. You see guys like their guys every week the rest of the year, save for Abilene Christian. But they go bombs away, and then you let them score with like 5 seconds left in the half. So instead of being up 20 to 14 or potentially even 24 to 14 and getting the ball, you're all of a sudden down 21 to 17, and everything changes. that atmosphere, the crowd, your locker room, their locker room, the sense of urgency on both sides. Like it changed everything in a matter of basically a minute there. And had A&M just gotten a first down and moved the sticks, they're at least kicking an easy field goal. And Miami's never getting that touchdown. And then to come out in the third quarter and you go all the way down the field and then you false start, you have to kick a field goal. Again, 3 instead of 7 there. And they were that, that was one. Was that the one where Evan couldn't get the first? He kind of had to stop and reach back.
Yeah.
And I thought Connor played better than anyone on the A&M offense yesterday. That was a throw that was behind. He sometimes he was getting that pressure, I think, was getting to him, and he was kind of stepping back into his throws. A lot of times he had to. Sometimes maybe not so much. But he throws that one. You don't get the first. False start. Field goal instead of a touchdown. And then you kick off, and it's backbreaker. And it was just I was actually in the end zone at that time watching, and as soon as a guy got out of his lane, it was over. There was nothing else but Randy Bond. Like, when the guy hit the 20-yard line, he was gone. You could just see it open up from the end. I was just like, oh, man. The only chance was if someone caught him.
You're not going to win on the road with 3 turnovers and a special teams touchdown given up.
Yeah.
You're just not.
And I'll even say 2 turnovers. That last one was in the final seconds.
Sure.
But still, 2 turnovers on your side of the field and a special teams touchdown given up and a missed field goal. Exactly how you lose. I wish those were the only issues. I wish it was, hey, couple of disastrous turnovers and a special teams breakdown.
I don't even know if we've hit the biggest issue. To me, the biggest issue, Billy, and there's a lot of issues, they could not tackle.
Yeah.
They could not. I mean, there were so many plays like that they got extra 16 yards because of it, or a touchdown because of it, or momentum changing plays because of trying to arm tackle or getting juked. There was 242 yards after the catch. That can't happen.
I mean, that last effort, you actually, of everything we're saying, and this is, someone will correct me because times have changed in college football, and I got into a debate with one of my good friends. We were sitting there at the house afterwards. I'm like, dude, when you're down 31 to 20 and you score a touchdown with multiple minutes left in the third quarter, I'm kicking that extra point every time, because what happens is you hold them to a field goal and it's still 34-27. You're down a touchdown. I know that you can go for 2 and then you're only down 3 at that point, but you got to know there's going to be a lot more scoring. You could tell where that game was headed. And 34-27, all of a sudden you score and you tie it up. And you missed it. Miami did have to kick a field goal, and it was 34-26. Now you're chasing that 2 again, which is what they would have had to have done had they scored. But you're down 8. And you have a chance to get off the field. For as bad as everything's gone for you outside of that 10-0 start, you have a chance to tie the game and go to overtime. And you'd been moving the ball. They moved the ball very well in the second half. It never came easy.
Right.
But I credit Petrino and that offense for the adjustment. They made the adjustment, which was Connor. They have to get it out of his hand quicker. They're not getting enough protection to let him just sit back there and let routes really anything deeper develop. And so that's what they did. And he was getting rid of it. We'll talk more about Connor. And I thought again, like I said, I think he played his ass off. And he was the bright spot of all of it. But they were moving the ball. And so you get the ball back with a couple minutes left there, and there's a real chance we're going to overtime, or at least lining up for a 2 to go to OT. And on that third down, and I'm pretty sure that was the play, where Durkin, who'd been passive, I thought most of the game, decides to blitz. And then you got Restrepo over there. And not only do you convert the third down, literally, just horrific tackle attempt. And I think Jordan Gilbert bounces off of him, and Damani, the completion's over there, and then it's just a walk-in touchdown. Like, that defensive effort was, I think it's the second worst performance. It's not an effort thing. Second worst performance I've seen since Jimbo's been here. But here's the thing. The worst came against Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson,
Maybe
Jamar
the best
Chase,
team we've seen.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Moss at tight end. Yeah, maybe the best offense ever. And this one was like second to that. And it's just unfathomable in year 6, and it's unfathomable. Really, it's unfathomable for DJ Durkin in year 2. We didn't expect, and for those that are in the gallery of, oh, you set our expectations, and it grow up. Like when things go bad, don't turn on the people that you want to get your information from, and that make it. You know, people around here like bust their ass to get y'all team intel, insight. And if you just choose to listen to what you want to, and if you chose during the offseason to only, and this is a select few because you get real vocal on Twitter, one of you're like a coach here in town, bring your ass onto the studio. You know I'm talking to you. Bring your ass in here and sit down with us. This is not me being a town tough guy. No one's in here challenging you to fight. Bring your ass in here. When I say it this way, it's to get you off of Twitter under your fake name, when, by the way, I know exactly who you are. Bring your ass in here and talk about it. Because certain people that want to burn the world down, and they don't care if they're a fellow Aggie, they don't care what. When you listen to what you want to listen to, and you want to get all fired up in the offseason, and then when it doesn't go the way you don't want to, and so far in a game, or if it ends up being a season, then you want to find someone to blame, and you blame someone for getting your hopes up. Because you chose not to listen, apparently, to what have I said my concerns were all offseason.
We have talked about the secondary being a huge concern. We have talked about the offensive line. We need to see it. And by the way, I think
I was more encouraged about the O-line than I was, though. I'm talking defense, David. I was very concerned about the cornerback situation. I said it, I don't know how many times. I was concerned about linebacker, and we needed to see them make plays. I even said when Torian York won the starting job, that's good, but it's not good because even like a guy like Anthony Hill, you've got to kind of work your way in there. And like, it was not a good sign that York could win it that quickly, even though I think he's going to be a really good linebacker at A&M. It was like almost like he would have won that by default because they didn't have a second option that they felt good about. And I said, Chris Russell, Martrell Harris, they had to have really good springs, and we didn't talk much about them. And then I said they had to have a really good fall camp, and you didn't hear a lot. All of a sudden, this true freshman's jumping up there. It felt like within 2 weeks of camp going. Linebacker and corner, you know, you had Chappelle and you had Edgerrin Cooper. Outside of that, there was a giant-ass unknown. And we liked what we saw from DeBerry last week. I did not like what I saw from him or anybody in that secondary this week. They missed so many tackles. They weren't there in coverage too often. They look very, as a collective, this is not an individual thing, but the group, the defense looks very slow. They look slow, and I watch games in the SEC and even around the country.
And Miami looked fast.
And Miami, they're not going to be world beaters. They looked fast. And part of it is a style of play. It's a mentality. The other part of it is, I do think you're so big up front. And, you know, you needed guys like Martrell Harris, Malik Silla, Eni White, these twitchier, edgy, lengthier guys to start matriculating in and developing. And we haven't seen those guys, the collective of them, hardly played at all the other night. And you're not getting any pressure, really. And I'm going, I'm not saying it's wrong not to have Silla or White in there because I don't know if they're showing it out there in practice every day. But you don't generally see them, and that was kind of what you thought they'd be. And these other linemen are like 280 plus, and that's fine. And I do think, look, I think A&M will match up fairly well against Alabama on defensively, as crazy as that sounds. I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to shut Bama down, but you saw what they did last year. If Bama's going to not trust Milroe's throwing ability outside of deep shots,
broken.
If you're going to try to not trust Milroe's throwing ability outside of deep shots, and you're going to try to run it between the tackles a lot, not just A&M, but a lot of teams are going to have success. But the Aggies are particularly built for that. That's what they showed, last season. It's also what they showed against, like an LSU that didn't have these game-changing weapons in the passing game. But problem is you can't stop Miami, and for the crowd that says the same thing. What did I say all week? And I'm not saying it's justified that it happened because we're in year 6. And, is DJ Durkin scared to blitz a lot because he knows that he'll be hanging a questionable back end out to dry? And if that's the case, then you get into this debate of, well, wouldn't you just rather be really aggressive and wouldn't you rather be really aggressive and maybe you're going to give up some, which you're doing anyway, but you're also going to create some negative plays and kill some drives along the way and maybe force some more turnovers because you're pressuring the QB? That is the yin and yang that he has to determine, not just week to week, but even within games. Like I said, he tried to come at him there at the end and they got burned. Maybe ironically, that's the play you lay back and make him make a throw and get a contested 3rd and 6. But do you think you go to the point of then we're in year 6? Why is Javon Thomas having to be out there on a key play there late in the first half when he's maybe not quite ready for that situation? Why?
And by the way, they audibled when they saw him. It was like, all right, we're going there.
Yeah, and why? Why is it the across the board talent level in that back 7 not where you necessarily want it to be? There's been so many recruits. You think of guys like Jacoby Matthews and Denver Harris and Smoke Bowie, and there's others too. And you look at you look over at Texas where I'm always forgetting his name. I've forgotten for a reason. The son of Wrecking Crew. Chet Brooks. Terrence Brooks is out there.
Yeah.
You went and got 2 transfers, and one of them Miami went at, and another one, he's banged up, is Tony Grimes.
Right.
But if it's a talent issue and you're trying to, I'm just sitting there going, either way, it's not the acceptable product in year 6 back there. And Durkin's got to get them better in year 2.
He's got to get them better, and there's an issue back there.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is with all the 5s and 4 stars that we talk about on the D-line, Tyler Van Dyke had all freaking day.
Yeah.
And if you have a questionable secondary, you've got to help them by getting pressure on a quarterback. And then it becomes, is it scheme or is it development? Because I can't believe you have that many guys that are so highly rated and none of them are getting to the QB.
Yeah, and they just, 2 things. I'm watching them, and they just seem to have such a hard time of just shedding blocks and getting off of them and making a play. And then I do think you've got you got a bunch of powerful physical dudes, but maybe not the twitchiest, and I say twitchy, just the quickest, they're pretty inside. They're pretty quick off the ball, and they got power. They just don't shed blocks really well to me. And I think individually you got like Walter Nolan flashed it again. He's one that will whip you off the snap, and it stands out. But they're not getting off the blocks, and you watch the pass rushes, and so much of it is a bull rush to kind of go right through those guys. That's just too easy on offensive linemen. And you either have that natural dip and turn the corner and you get real low and it's almost impossible to deal with, or you have just explosive twitch and edge off of it, or you have an array of pass rush moves. And I haven't seen that lately, and I didn't see it yesterday. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack on that defensive side of the ball, and it's just like, man.
Well, and I'm going to follow up with a couple questions because there's so much on the defense.
Yeah.
Offensively, can this offense be good enough to carry this team? Because when we were doing season predictions and all the question marks we had, I was teetering between 8-4 and 9-3 because I had questions on the defensive side. Offensively, I am a little surprised, A, how the first half looked, and secondly, that Anias hasn't really flashed yet.
Yeah.
Like, I'm waiting on that.
For sure.
That Moose is not really a part of it. And I'm not saying that the other guys don't deserve. I mean, they've been balling. Noah's balling, Evan's balling.
Yep.
But that has been surprising to me that we haven't unleashed what I thought we'd see Anias do some really interesting things with Bobby Petrino. We haven't seen that yet.
I've got some thoughts on offense. I want to say one more thing about defense too, though. What did I say about this game, and why did it concern me? Game 2 on the road, not a sold out environment, but a hostile environment across the country, and against a team that had more, that could match you athletically at a lot of spots. Not across. A&M's recruited better, they've got more, but could match you at a lot of spots. So I kept saying this is an SEC level team. They're like middle of the pack SEC football team, I think they would be. And in this year's SEC, who knows? Maybe they're a top 4 team in the league,
right?
Somewhere between that 4 and 10, and who the hell knows where in this crap. But they would be one of them. A&M's going to play 6 other teams on this level, which is a concern, or you can say, okay, they're beatable, or you go, well, did you see what Miami just did? But that's why it was dangerous. I mean, defensively, my concern was Shannon Dawson spreading them out, running the football at them, and then picking them apart, with Van Dyke, a veteran QB. I just think by formation and the style of play, it really hurts A&M's strength, which is those big hosses up front. And here's the problem with that. And I thought they did a good job against the run until like later in the game. But even so, they rushed that was a pleasant surprise.
They rushed for 77 yards.
That was a pleasant, and that's without a lot of sacks too. That was pleasant to see the way they hung in there against the run, because I didn't know if they could do that as well because of how Miami was going to spread it. But Ole Miss is going to do stuff like this. Arkansas is going to do stuff like this. Auburn, who could only score 14 points against Cal, and you freeze, are going to try to do stuff like this. I'm trying to think on that schedule. I mean, everybody does it a little bit in college football now, but Mississippi State, and that's 4 teams just right off the rip, top of your head, that are going to come at you with this approach. So that's why I would have felt so much better if A&M could have shown. My concern, David, probably ahead of all else, is I said before the game and I said before the season, how they handle this tempo and this spread you out and commit to running it out of the spread and setting things up that way, and then that A&M secondary holding up. Those were my concerns, and I was expecting to see a lot more out of Durkin's defense, and I wasn't expecting them. I wasn't. That's what I was saying. I didn't expect them to go out and shut Miami down. I was hopeful in a perfect world they could, but I wasn't.
It started off that way.
I was not expecting them to be able to do that because of the matchup and because of, some of the question marks in the back end. But to give up 48, 41, 40, 6 touchdowns on offense the way they did, it's beyond concerning when you look at the teams on the schedule. With that said, we might be entering a world where A&M is going to have to score a lot of points this year. And I know they had 33. They had 14 gifted to them.
Yeah, short side of the field a couple times.
But I will caution against looking at these first half numbers offensively and remembering that, A, you were playing against a new D coordinator that didn't show a damn thing against
New Mexico. Miami,
Yeah.
Ohio.
So, and B, they had two very short fields. So they gave up, and it's not a bad thing, they gave up 2 whole drives in that half that were a total of like 30 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the numbers and you go, sometimes you have 2 more full possessions. Those weren't full possessions. They were maybe 35 yards between 2 drives, if that. And they turned them both into touchdowns. Then you go,
But Bill,
would you have had those points? Because
right.
who's to say would you have gone all the way down the field?
Bill, here's my thing about the whole offense and defense. You were gifted a lot. Penalties that went your way, drive-changing penalties that went like.
You gifted them a lot too, though. That's the problem.
Well, it started off, and this is what
early on. You're right.
Like,
you do.
My recipe to beat Miami was this: get off to an early start and stop the run. Hello, I was wrong because they did both of those things,
right?
And they were down at the half.
I'm telling you, they were down at the half. That was just everything they did contributed to that little chain of events happening there at the end. Everything that happened contributed to that, and it was just like, gosh, I'm sitting there watching that clock when A&M got that stop, and it was a big 3rd down, and they got it, and I go, okay, here we go. Aggies are going to get the ball. If they can get it was like 4 minutes. If they could get a first down or 2, they're golden. Because at a minimum, you're going in up 17-14 after watching them take momentum. You're getting the ball, or you're going up 20-14, if not 24-14, and you're getting the ball. It felt like a real turning point on that 3rd down stop by the defense. And then when A&M got a first down, you go, I think it was Jake Johnson maybe had a long play there.
He had a good game.
You go, okay, there it goes. Jake in the tight end position in general, I thought was a bright spot. What Jake have? 3 for 20.
3 for 22. And Max Wright had 1 for 18.
So 4 for 40 from your tight ends. And then Crown over with a tremendous catch. That was a beautiful play call. Man, I really thought, and Evan Stewart, though, too. I actually heard somebody I was talking to was just on Evan after the game to me. And I said, man, like, I know there were a couple plays there where you wish he could have got that first down and he had a drop.
Yeah.
The guy went 11 for 142 and made some really nice plays and catches. He did. I mean, look, I thought he was more than, if you got that from everybody on every lineman and every back, and but Wigman was a star, and Wigman and these receivers, and you do need to figure out Anias, and I want to get to that in a second, but the passing weapons and Connor Wigman are what give you hope. Connor, I'm sorry, I haven't written it yet, so I haven't looked at these. To go 31-53 for 336. He had 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. One of the picks was 0% on him.
Right.
Like 0.0.
The slipping issue.
Anias slipped. And then I'm going, yeah, how in the hell do we go out there and slip and slide around everywhere and they don't? And I'm going to tell you, Connor had another touchdown where he slipped. There was an interception where Anias slipped, and there was a touchdown when Wigman slipped where he dropped back, and on his drop he slipped and almost went down untouched. He recovered, but it was kind of like what the bad snap does.
Right.
And that was when Reuben Owens was running up the seam, and he made a great attempt at a catch. But Connor makes that throw all the time. If he hits that, that might be a walk-in touchdown, and they did end up kicking a field goal there. That was a slip. That was slip related. And I'm telling you right now, that cost him 4 points. That dude got battered. Was he perfect? No. He got battered. And that second pick was just to throw it up for grabs, again, under pressure. I don't know how many times he got hit. I think PFF said something like he was the most pressured quarterback in the country this week. And to sit in there and throw for 330, and some of the throws he made with a guy in his face, the crown over touchdown, he had to not get sacked.
He didn't get sacked at all. And
So even on some of those incompletions, it's like a hell of a job.
Yeah.
And to, keep trying to lead A&M back the way he did, I'm as fired up about him as I've been still. Like, I didn't come away from that. I'm actually more fired up because one thing no one can ever question is that young man's toughness and his desire to go out there and compete and play football. And I just think he's a damn playmaker. And I think it's got to happen. I mean, it doesn't have to happen. I think this whole line will get better. And I think these running backs, as they figure out what it is exactly they've got, will be better. Le'Veon Moss was banged up and hurt. I don't know what. I think it might be a hamstring. But, Reuben Owens is not a factor in the running game yet. Le'Veon Moss was banged up. So I think those things are going to get better and help. The question is now, David, to me, is can this, I'll go back to it, can this offensive line block well enough to allow this offense to score not more than he did last year, but just by anybody's definition, can this offense be a high-scoring offense that scores a lot of points every week and that can go get you 40 on a given Saturday? Because that's what I'm feeling like they might have to do when you look at the Mississippi schools and Rattler in South Carolina, which is what North Carolina did to them. Bama, it might take, hey, you got to get in the 30s to beat them because Milroe's going to run it and he's going to hit some deep balls, but you can get enough stops that if you look at some of these teams they're going to play, LSU and Jaden Daniels, like, can they just be a scoring team? And I'm not talking about Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans, Ryan Swope scoring 21 points after.
But what we got last night.
Yeah.
Or yesterday afternoon,
better. More efficient.
More efficient
lethal.
throughout the 4 quarters as opposed, yes.
O-line will have to get a lot better. And I don't know. I think they got outnumbered a lot Saturday. I think, they said, we're just going to do this until y'all make us pay. But they also lost a lot of point of attack. Too many times I saw a guy trying to pull, and Miami was so aggressive. It's funny. I see A&M's lineman trying to pull and make a block, and the Miami guy gets to the point faster than these Aggie blockers do. But then when the Aggies are on defense, I see them running games and stuff with 320-pound guys. That's not on them because they're really good at what they do for being that size. But then they're twisting around and doing something. It's like they're not quite getting to where they need to be as defenders. They're almost taking the longer route, and they're these big behemoth guys, whereas the Miami guys are taking the shorter route, and that's getting them to where they beat the blockers to where the blockers in maroon and white are trying to get. It's frustrating. It was frustrating to watch both sides of that.
Billy, Olin asked Jimbo about expectations yesterday, and I'm going to ask you, how does yesterday change your expectations for them? Because I don't
significantly.
Because, by the way, let me just losing to Miami is not that big of a deal. It's not a good deal, but it's the way they lost to Miami that I think makes me now wonder.
Yeah,
all these things that were possible, are they really?
Yeah, I agree. Well, again, I go back to I'm questioning this offensive line more than I was going. I wasn't just like, hey, they're going to be elite, but I was going, man, they really should take a massive step. And I'd outline every single reason why, all the way up to they were a lot more excited about it over there. And they might still prove that there was a reason why. But that one's been called into much more question. And then it's just, man, so much of where I'm at, David, is disappointment in that defensive showing.
Yep.
Miami, who knows? They could go out there and be a 10-2 team this year in the ACC because of schedule or something. That doesn't change. I know where they would be in the SEC from watching them play. They would be in that group where A&M's going to play about a half dozen teams just like them in terms of just if you were rating on a 1 to 10. Here's
Ole
college
Miss
football.
Level.
You're 1 to 10. Where's this Miami team? and there's about 6 teams A&M play that whatever point on that scale Miami is, they're within a point of them. And there's a big logjam, just like there is in the conference outside of Georgia. Mm-hmm. It includes LSU and it includes Bama. I think Bama's going to go out and lose three games this year. That's only 2 more. I could see it being worse than that. I don't like – you want to talk about secondary. I mean, I credit – and I tweeted about Petrino and Sark. I'm getting roasted for it. And it's all in fun, and if you talk enough smack, you're going to get burned. Yep. But Texas had credit them good. They had guys catching the ball, and the dudes would turn around looking for someone to tackle. They would be shocked how open they were. Bama's got issues, and they couldn't block Texas up front. In the one-on-one matchups, they consistently got beat. They have a quarterback that doesn't see the field at all. We saw that last year when he played A&M, and he made like 2 really good throws the whole night. They got a problem. And LSU might have a problem. They got a DB's problem themselves. We got to see when they start playing a real team. Ole Miss, that's a tough one. A&M play there. I don't like that matchup. But Ole Miss isn't going to be world beaters. Mississippi State's looked good through 2 games of playing no one. I look around this conference, Arkansas, South Carolina, who the Aggies play. Tennessee worries the hell out of me now.
That offense.
That one, when you're looking at matchups and you want to circle one, and somebody could sit here and go, every matchup, I get it. Every game is in question outside of like 2 of them left. But you want to circle a matchup, that one makes you go, oh, man, that could be daunting just because of that passing game against this and Heupel's tempo and that was the team I forgot to mention. When I said there's 4 teams that will do a similar thing, there's 5 more that you're going to play of the 8 you play in conference. So that's why yesterday made me sit there and go, that ain't good. And I'm not talking about just for yesterday. I'm talking about for the whole thing. Now, here's what I've learned, David, and we all know this, and LSU could tell you about it last year, and we could tell you about it in 2014 where we thought A&M was going to – it wasn't just us. It was college football. They had A&M in the playoff. Kenny Hill Heisman. It's what Texas fans should probably concern themselves with right now today because you don't know who you're beating or who you're losing to. You just don't know. Like, how good was LSU when Texas almost beat them early? If the Longhorns would have known that at the time, maybe they would have had a little more confidence that season. You don't know how good Miami's going to be. You don't know how good or bad Bama's going to be. When A&M beat South Carolina, it was like these guys are going to take over the damn sport. They're even better somehow than they were with John. Right. That's what people outside of College Station thought. And then they went and played Mississippi State, and they got absolutely demolished. And then they played Bama, and they lost 59-0. And then they played Ole Miss and got cremated. So you don't know these things early on. So I do understand, like, look, they got to beat Auburn at home. I don't think there's a successful season for this football program, which it is hanging in the balance. And that is not being dramatic. Everyone knows that. I don't think this is a successful football season if they don't go out and beat Auburn at home in 2 weeks. And I think they have to now go and beat Arkansas. I said it before the year. If you lose to Miami, if you went 4-1 in your first 5 games, and that means you'd have to beat Bama at home, which they did not look equipped to do that. I do still think you get them at home, and they're a better matchup. I will say that. Not a better matchup than Miami because Bama's better than Miami, but A&M is built to better compete with that style of play.
We've performed well against them the last 2 years.
And they have. And really, since Jimbo's been here for the most part. But you look at now, if I would have said, if you go 4-1 in the first 5, and I understand they're not there. But if you were, the one game you would rather lose in that conversation, you wouldn't want to be sitting here today talking about it, but it would have been Miami. Do I think they're going to go 4-1? Not if they play like they did yesterday. Would I make that bet today? No, not the way. There's too many weaknesses that need a lot of shoring up. But I don't think Auburn's that good. And Arkansas is, they can beat you, but I don't think they're world beaters.
I'm not as worried about them because of the past.
Yeah, I don't think they're world beaters. And look, and a bad A&M team beat them with that quarterback and running back last year.
Right.
If you can get those games and you get Alabama in here, you'll have your second chance. You'll have the chance at redemption that feels 800 miles away right now. But it's game 2. You've got a game this week that you can iron some things out. Auburn has to come here. So I will say I have not given up on this season and A&M accomplishing something. When they accomplishing something, what's it to accomplish? Is it an accomplishment will be winning the West? I'm not sitting here telling you I'm confident that's
a season of some substance.
That to me is what I'm talking about. Like, can you still? I said before that nine wins and win a bowl game. That feels a long way off. Get back to me if they go 2-0 in SEC play and Bama's coming in here and you're hosting them at Kyle Field. And that feels a million worlds away right now. But there are enough things we've seen with them to say, yeah, I mean, they can beat an Auburn at home. They can go win at Arkansas neutral. It's going to be hard, though. Those are far from givens.
Look, I'm going to even go back to 21. Because as bad of a start as that was, the Colorado almost lost, the Arkansas loss, the Mississippi State loss.
Yeah.
You beat Bama, and it changed the trajectory of the season. Unfortunately, you fizzled out at the very end. Yeah. But what I'm saying is it was still all there for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you went on the road for the last 2 games that you really almost won, and it's a whole nother conversation. And they did play really bad early. I worry about them being overmatched defensively. I worry about Durkin's philosophy. I hope to see it. You know, I hope this is a game where you go, okay, we can't just. It's not even death by 1,000 cuts because Elko did a lot of bend but don't break. People forget that. Yeah. There was, and we were sitting there going, it's probably by necessity early on, but it really wasn't. It was that they bent and didn't break. That would be acceptable to me this year with this offense. I think they could be a really good football team if they can figure that part out. But you can't go death by 1,000 cuts and give up big plays. You certainly can't do that. You can't be suspect on the back end and get no pressure on the quarterback. You can't do that. So that's my concern there. But listen, I want to say something too. You're not going to do jack squat this year if you can't win away from Kyle Field or in a true road game. 0-7 is just, it's just disgraceful to lose that many road games in a row at Texas A&M.
Since the Orange Bowl, Billy. Since the Orange Bowl.
Yeah.
Your 2 road wins.
Or Missouri and Colorado.
And Colorado.
Colorado was 2-10.
Yes.
Missouri was really bad that year.
And you were seconds away from losing the Colorado game.
Yeah.
And Missouri was bad, as you said.
I don't know what it is. You know, they go up there, they go to games on Thursday nights. Very few teams do that. I don't know if that, and by the way, the one year they were really good on the road. They beat Tennessee. They beat Mississippi State. They beat Auburn. They lost to Bama. So 3-1 in the SEC in road games, right? Maybe even 4-1. That was the all SEC schedule. Part of that is because you're playing in 25% capacity, so the road environment is not nearly as daunting. But they also went to those games on Friday. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't know, maybe the guys are sitting too long or they're getting, it's doing something with the focus. I don't know, and I'm just saying when it's, and I'm sure Jimbo would completely disagree with that. I think he does it his way for a reason. I think that's something they've been doing dating back to Florida State when they had a hell of a lot of success with it. But when you're 0-7 on the road and you know you're 2 in whatever it is, you know, away from home, since, you know, and the 2 are really bad football teams, and one of them, like you said, it was down to the last seconds. I do think you start looking into reasons like, okay, what is there to change? What can we do? And certain things, like you start at the top of a list and go, okay, well, there's this. Is it 2-10 in their last 12 against Power 5? That's just
I ain't gonna cut it, buddy.
That's demoralizing when you look at that number. So they've got to get it right. Listen, I think this team can score. I still like the Bobby Petrino hire and influence on this offense. I love what I've seen from Connor. I think they have real weapons at receiver. I'm not sure. Look, I know Aniyah Smith will pick up a blitz. And I know you got a lot of youth and inexperience at running back. Aniyah looks, I said this to him when he's come in, you know, he looks thicker to me. And I think part of it is a byproduct of how much work he put in the offseason to come back. But I don't know if it's affected his speed or we just haven't seen enough of him to see. But I would love to see more of Aniyah at running back,
yes,
and then more of Moose in that slot.
Yes.
And I think Aniyah is just I think he's deep down. I'm not sure he's not. I think he's a hell of a running back.
Yes.
Go back and watch him in 2020. He sees it. He cuts. He's tough as hell, and he's explosive through the hole. Like, I wouldn't hate it. And you could use him as such a passing weapon. I know they made some real nice things happen with Reuben Owens yesterday a couple times out of the backfield. You can certainly do that with Aniyah. I wouldn't hate it. And Moose is a playmaker out there offensively.
Yeah.
I do like the offense. I do think they're going to score points. I do think the O-line's going to get better as the season quickly progresses. I do think they have a real shot in their first 2 SEC games, and you can build some momentum with a couple of the big dogs back-to-back there, particularly with Bama coming in. So if I'm A&M, I'm not throwing in the towel. They're not going to, but I'm saying just people following it. I'm not giving up on it yet. I've got real concerns because this could very easily go one way or the other. And it feels like, you know, if it can go one way or the other, it's a lot closer to them falling off a cliff here.
Unfortunately. Because
you drop Auburn at home and see what happens. You lose to Arkansas, and then you got Bama and Tennessee after that, and see what happens. But, again, I do think it's as close as beating 2 teams that aren't, to me, they're not really top 25 type teams, and neither was Miami. But it's as close as doing those and to give yourself another shot at it, at
Miami
this thing and
was coached
regroup.
well yesterday. I'm sorry. They just really were.
They were. And they played hard. But see, to me, we knew that was coming, and Jimbo knows that. He's played Miami and is as familiar with them as anybody. They were coached hard. They played hard. And A&M, play that game again, and they could win that game with certain breaks. But it still would have had to have been you probably have to win that game 42-38, 41, 45, 41. And you could play that game again, and maybe it goes that way, but you still have the same concerns because what would happen, I think, if you played again is A&M wouldn't be wildly aggressive on defense. They would still give up big plays in the secondary. I think they would still miss tackles because they're out of – you miss tackles because you're out of position or you're late getting there. And whether that's a speed thing, an inexperienced thing, or a thinking too much thing, or a scheme thing, you miss tackles because you're late getting there. Yeah. And on so many of those little screens that you'd say, oh, they were so close to blowing that up. And then they, those little tunnel screens and the swing passes. And A&M's just like a step slow. And is it slow or is it not reacting quick enough? But you miss tackles because you're not there when you need to be there. And I think all of those things, you play that game again, A&M can win that game. But I think all of those things, except maybe like the kickoff return, are still going to be an issue. Miami was still getting after you up front when the Aggies had the ball. Connor was still going to be under duress. But, yeah, you could have said, you could play that again and a couple things happen and they win. But we're trying to see how this season goes, and those concerns would have absolutely have still been there. You just would have felt a hell of a lot better, and you had felt a hell of a lot more confident on them improving them. But this is a big, fat disappointment, but it's also I would caution that it's a TBD. And if they beat Auburn in a couple weeks and beat ULM and then go beat Auburn, it doesn't mean that they've
figured it out,
solve those problems. If they beat Arkansas, it doesn't necessarily mean it. But now they're in a mode of just survive week to week. And, LSU looked like hammered crap when they played Florida State in that first game last year. And no one thought Florida State was very good. And they ended up going on to be, I think Florida State was a 10, maybe a 9, 10-3 team by the end of the year. I think they were 9-3 and went 10-3. And now they're a title contender. I'm not saying Miami's on that track. I don't I don't see it.
I hope they are.
It'd be nice. But to me, like, Florida State did not look very good last year. That was a slop fest, slug fest. And LSU, my point is, looked awful. And Jaden Daniels didn't look very good. And then they ended up having a great year.
But, and I'm sorry, and we probably need to wrap this up, but that was in year whatever, or year 1 of Brian Kelly, and year
2 of
Norvell,
Mario Cristobal.
Year 2 of this is year 6.
Absolutely.
And I want it to work.
It's not the start they need.
We need, but if we're already talking about, like Auburn becoming a huge game for the season tells you exactly where we are.
Yeah, it should be. It should be Auburn at home in year 1 under Hugh Freeze. If you were where you're supposed to be, should be a guaranteed win. I never thought it would be. Said it's going to be tough, even if they would have beaten Miami. Mm-hmm. You have got to win these games now. It's just Miami felt like a real litmus test, and they absolutely failed that test. And now these other games become more must-wins than they otherwise were. They really do. So it's look, there's only one way for them to recover from that. And I'm not saying that they're 2022 LSU. What I will say, that the similarity in this thing is that the West is there to be had by anyone. If anyone can get to being a top, like if you're a legit top 15 team, one of the 15 best, you might be able to win the West this year, because then you just like split with the other 2 that are up there, and it probably will turn out where there's 3 teams at 6-2 in the conference. There are other teams I'd put ahead of A&M right now to get there. Make no mistake about it. LSU, Alabama, probably even Mississippi State right now.
Ole Miss?
And it's probably, maybe, but it's probably Ole Miss, Arkansas, A&M, like all kind of there. And then but it's not like those other teams are a lot higher. Yeah. It's really not. So they can work on stuff. Unfortunately, there's a lot to work on, and we were hoping not to be having this conversation. But that's a rough weekend for Aggie football. It's a rough weekend for Jimbo and those players, and that is part of it. Like, I really want to see them rebound and recover. Yeah. And they lost to App State last year, and that was as low as it gets. And they beat Miami, and they beat Arkansas. And the reason they ended up beating those teams wasn't because they were playing great football. It was because they were really dialed in and focused. They were playing at home and in neutral, and they just really didn't want to lose. And they got a little better, and they beat a couple teams that weren't that good. And I think you get that opportunity again this year. with these first two conference opponents, and then you get Bama coming in. It's set up for a recovery more like you mentioned the 21 season. It's set up for a recovery like that. There are too many unknowns for me to be sitting here and just tell you I'm super optimistic about that.
All right, that's going to do it for the Luchador. We'll be doing the show tomorrow. Billy will be here for a couple hours. Thanks to Academy Sports and Outdoors.